The Prepper Podcast, episode 85.
We've got to know whether or not they're prisoners of Christ.
The American people would never vote for socialism. He said, under the name of liberalism, the American people will adopt every fragment of the socialist program.
The Prepper Podcast is an up-to-date survival podcast based on military, wilderness, and modern-day survival and may be found at theprepperpodcast.com. I am Ken Jensen, and this is the podcast about everything survival. My goal is to teach you strategies on self-reliance and develop survival skills and critical thinking in everyone, resulting in a more resilient and a more enjoyable life. This is episode 85, and today is going to be a terrific show. I have to take another break from the Getting Started episodes so that you and I can talk to Paul Munsen of Sun Oven about solar cooking in third world countries. I also am going to discuss the upcoming Sun Oven webinar that will be coming this coming week. The show notes may be found at theprepperpodcast.com/085. May also be found at theprepperpodcast.com/Sun Oven. Now for the housekeeping. Today is an interview podcast. You can also be interviewed if you go to theprepperpodcast.com/guests and fill out the form completely. I'm also available to do interviews on your podcast. If you want me on your podcast or blog, then go to theprepperpodcast.com/media and fill out that form. Don't forget to give me a review at theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes or /Stitcher, and you can win a preparedness consulting call with me. I do that for people who give me reviews on iTunes or Stitcher. I'm hosting a webinar with Paul Munsen of Sun Oven International, and we're going to cover the powers of the sun oven. We're going to learn how to harness the power of the sun to cook, as Paul shares his fundamental techniques in the Sun Oven's Cooking Essentials seminar. You will find this seminar valuable, whether you have a sun oven and want to learn more, or if you know absolutely nothing about solar cooking, how you can utilize solar cooking. The Sun Oven webinar is going to be Tuesday, July 21st, so mark that on your calendars. Make sure that you set up a notification on either your phone or on your email or on your calendar. If you have anything that can give you a notification, make sure that you set up a notification. Tuesday, July 21st, 7 p.m. United States Central Time. That would also be 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Space is limited, so make sure that you get a seat. Get there as soon as you hear this on the podcast. Go to theprepperpodcast.com/Sun Oven webinar. That's theprepperpodcast.com/Sun Oven webinar to sign up. This is the only week that I will be announcing this webinar, so don't forget to sign up if you want to be involved. And we'll talk a little bit about it in today's show. And now for your news in 2 minutes by none other than Jay Bradbury of PreparePDX.com.
Hello, this is Jay Bradbury from PreparePDX.com, and now for your news in 2 minutes. Volcanic eruptions that changed human history. Throughout human history, sustained volcanic cooling effects on climate have triggered crop failures and famines. These events may have also contributed to pandemics and societal decline in agricultural-based communities. Moving on, testing heats up at solar tower with high-temperature falling particle receiver. Researchers are working to lower the cost of solar energy systems and improve efficiencies in a big way, thanks to a system of small particles. Falling particle receiver technology is expected to further advance the state-of-the-art in concentrating solar power tower systems capable of generating up to 100 megawatts of electricity. And last but not least, where does the water go when it doesn't flow? This new analysis offers an estimate of hard-to-come-by global water measurement. Water used by plants and water that evaporates from land. By knowing these amounts, we can better understand how ecosystems, including watersheds, work. In a decade when our reserves of fresh water are declining, in some cases to critically low levels, this information couldn't be more timely. And that's your news. Back to you, Ken.
Thank you, Jay, for that wonderful news segment. And if you enjoy Jay's news segments and want to know more about him, please go to preparepdx.com. He doesn't do it every episode, but when he has time, he comes to me and he brings me a wonderful news segment that you guys, I know, love listening to. So make sure that you let him know that you enjoy his stuff by going to preparepdx.com and getting a hold of him. So once again, thank you, Jay. Now let's move on. And now for the topic. Like I said, I am here with Paul Munsen of Sun Ovens International. All right, Paul Munsen is president of Sun Ovens International, and we're going to talk about exactly what he's involved in. He is, like I said, he's the president of Sun Oven International, which is located in Elburn, Illinois, and is the leading manufacturer of high-quality solar cooking devices. Sun Ovens, the brand, are made in the United States, and the company is committed to helping people in the U.S. prepare for emergencies and save energy while using a portion of the cash flow to work in deforested developing countries. Paul has been involved in solar cooking projects and has taught solar cooking on 5 continents and has been involved with both large and small-scale projects supported by the Rotary International, United States Agency for International Development, U.S. Department of Energy, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, the UN High Commissioner on Refugees, the South African Ministry of Minerals and Energy, the British High Commission, and the World Bank. He has addressed the United Nations Commission on Sustainable Development at the United Nations headquarters in New York. He is the past president of the Illinois Society for International Development and a member of Solar Cookers International and the Illinois Solar Energy Association. All right, now I mention it in the interview, so in full disclosure, he has given me a Sun Oven at no cost to me, but I am very critical of products whenever I try them out, whether I buy them or somebody gives them to me. I will tell you right now that the Sun Oven is a little small for me, but otherwise it is a great, great product, and I'm going to talk to Paul on that. So, Paul, why don't you tell me how you're doing today?
Fantastic. How about you?
I'm doing great. Paul, would you mind telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I've been making sun ovens for the last 17 years. I started working with the inventor of the sun oven about 18 years ago, and during the 17 years that I've been working with the sun ovens, I had the opportunity to teach solar cooking classes on 5 different continents around the world, and so we have a small business. Our goal is to help people in the U.S. save energy and prepare for emergencies, and then we use a portion of the proceeds that we've generated from that to work in developing countries around the world. So we're very passionate about cooking with the sun, both here in the U.S. to be better prepared for emergencies, but also just because it tastes so good, as well as there's a lot of things we do internationally that actually help people stay alive because women aren't inhaling smoke and children aren't inhaling smoke. So that has a very positive effect on the lives of women and children in third world countries as well.
Yeah, the Sun Oven has done really great things over in the third world countries, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. We have them in about 130 countries around the world, and any sun oven that's bought in the United States is made in the United States, but we've also empowered entrepreneurs to make sun ovens to be used in the country that they're made in, and they're made in Haiti and in Ghana and the Dominican Republic and Uganda and Ethiopia and Mauritania. So we have a wide variety of different types of programs we've been able to do in developing countries around the world.
That's really neat. Well, I'm want to kind of get into talking about the Sun Oven. I'll pepper in some stuff within that about the global community and what you guys have been doing there. But well, you know that Paul has worked with sun ovens and has traveled around the world. Okay, so Paul has been all over the place. Paul, what role does solar cooking play in the developing nations?
Well, solar cooking really plays an important role. There's still 2.5 billion people in the world who cook with wood or charcoal or animal dung as their primary cooking fuel. And when a woman cooks over a wood or charcoal fire, she inhales the same amount of smoke as smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day. And oftentimes when women are cooking, they cook in very confined areas because the wood or charcoal is so expensive and valuable. So they're in confined areas inhaling smoke, and they'll oftentimes have small children with them in that same area. And each year in the continent of Africa alone, 1.6 million children under the age of 5 die of respiratory diseases, primarily from the indoor air pollution of cooking fires. So when we can replace 80 or 90% of that smoke with the sun, it has a huge effect on the health of women and children, as well as effect on the deforestation, which is something that is a major problem in a lot of places around the world. So it has a very positive environmental impact, but more importantly, a human impact in saving the lives of women and children.
Good, and we haven't mentioned the fact that it can pasteurize water.
Yeah, it's great for boiling or pasteurizing water, and so you can, the benefit of pasteurizing water over boiling, it kills the same germs, it's just that it does it a lot faster. It's more than twice as fast to pasteurize as opposed to boil water, so it takes less time and a lot less energy.
So you talked about your business model, and that seemed kind of unique, that you had programs where people were basically building the sun ovens in the country that they were going to be used.
Yeah, it really, when we ship sun ovens, for example, we can ship 440 fully assembled ovens in a standard 40-foot shipping container, but we can ship the parts for 1,800 ovens unassembled in the same shipping container. And we make the ovens in the U.S. for distribution in the U.S., and our plant is in Illinois, and over in Illinois, about 40 miles west of Chicago. But when we assemble an oven in Illinois, there's about $35 of labor to put it together. When one's assembled in Haiti, for example, there's less than $2 of labor to put it together, and that's paying more than double the daily wage, so it's not a slave-type wage at all. It's actually a good wage. And by then reducing the cost of the shipping of the parts and the labor to put it together, it can be more affordable to people in developing countries around the world.
Right, and the reason why you have cheaper labor, essentially, it's fair trade, but it's cheaper labor because you're going to be selling to those countries, and those countries can't afford to purchase something that's going to cost as much as it does here in the U.S.
Exactly, and so by making it, and frankly, a lot of the people who use sun ovens make less than $2 a day. But what we found is that we don't give sun ovens away. We believe that there's a lot to be said to taking a private sector entrepreneurial approach to solving problems. So instead of taking an approach that some people think only nonprofits or governments can take, what we try to do is set up programs where women who get a sun oven can pay for it in small weekly installments using the money they save by not buying charcoal or other cooking fuel. So then instead of giving a sun oven away, if people do eventually pay the full cost of it, the same dollars can be recycled over and over again. So we have programs that allow women to pay for them in weekly installments, and then we think it's a win-win if we can get it started with helping people in the U.S. Save energy and get better prepared for emergencies, get programs started in developing countries. We also make a large commercial solar oven for third world countries that we call a villager sun oven, and that can make 1,200, 1,200 meals in an 8-hour day, or it can make 28 loaves of bread an hour. And what we've been doing with those in a lot of places is we subsidize the cost of those for orphanages, and it relates very much to emergency preparedness because a lot of Americans have been very generous donors to orphanages around the world. And if an orphanage, if our economy goes south and has problems, there's a good chance that donations are going to fall off. So if the villager son oven can make 1,200 meals a day, but if an orphanage has 100 kids, they actually only need 200 meals a day. So when we ship it with a whole bakery package. It has 150 different items and pots and pans and insect-proof flour containers and everything they need for a bakery. The orphanage can then bake bread during the time they're not cooking the food for the kids, sell the bread, generate income to create self-sufficiency, as well as, particularly in Africa where you have so many AIDS orphans and normally a child would learn a trade from their parents, if the kids are able to learn the skill of bread baking when they're in the orphanage, then they're able to, when they get too old to stay there, get a job in a bakery or a restaurant and gives them a job skill as well. So we harness the sun to help create self-sufficiency, and again, we think there's a lot to be said for taking a private sector approach to things that oftentimes people think should only just be governments or nonprofits that kind of throw money at problems as opposed to solutions.
Well, it sounds like a very libertarian way of looking at things.
Well, I'm not a libertarian necessarily, but I am an entrepreneur, and I really think there's an awful lot to be said for the free enterprise system that, frankly, we've built. God has given us the ability to have the greatest nation in the world because of some of that entrepreneurial spirit that we've been able to have for the last 250 years, and hope we're able to continue more of the entrepreneurial type thing, but using ways to create self-sustaining programs, I think, just makes it a win-win in every way it can be.
Yeah, I get that. So because you've been all over the world, basically, looking into these other communities and coming up with solutions to a problem that they all have, coming up with a solution for each of these different countries. This is the Prepper Podcast, so what in the world can preppers in North America, what's the main thing that we can learn from the people in the third world countries?
Well, I think the one thing that we can learn is self-sufficiency, is to find ways that we can be more self-sufficient. Not that there's anything wrong with relying on our neighbors for things, but when you look at the infrastructure, I spent some time in Afghanistan on a project, for example, and I can remember in the 1970s when Afghanistan was a thriving economy and had very nice highways and high-rise buildings, and now you go into Kabul and it's bombed out. You can find none of the high-rises are still totally intact, and very few of the buildings even have windows in them left. And you can see how something like that can affect a country that was thriving, and unfortunately, 40 years of war, it's just taken its toll on it. And I think that there's lessons we can learn from an economy like that, and seeing how the people learn how to survive on their own and learn how to be able to forge their way through. I think those of us who are trying to be prepared, I know that my emergency preparedness as I've traveled around the world has taken on a whole new meaning on what it means to be self-sufficient and what I really have to do. And I've learned from things I've seen in developing countries how to be better prepared myself in the United States.
Yeah, I know that I don't remember the nonprofit organization, but one of the ways that I learned to pasteurize water is essentially just building an aluminum foil solar reflector and putting a 2-liter bottle of water on top of the solar reflector and allowing the sun to pasteurize the water just due to the ultraviolet rays.
Mm-hmm.
And that was 100% a legitimate way to kill bacteria and things of that nature in water. Of course, there's no chemical removal, but that's not typically what people are dying from over there. It's dysentery, and you get dysentery from bacteria and things like that. So that's one really cool thing that I learned from nonprofit organization that was trying to come up with solutions for I think Solus or Sodus? I think it's Solus or Sodus, S-O-D-U-S. And they came up with the 8-hour pasteurization just straight from the sun. And the water doesn't even get that hot. It's just the UV rays that does it. Another thing
right, water pasteurizes, one of the things, just in case people are wondering about that, water pasteurizes by bringing it to a temperature above 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 minutes, and that kills all of the same germs that boiling does. So pasteurizing water doesn't take as much energy as boiling, and there are ways. One of the little devices that we make available with the sun ovens is a little device called a WAP, or water pasteurization indicator. So it's a way of measuring to be 100% sure the water is pasteurized. And pasteurizing water is a real important factor for drinking water. What we suggest people do who are going to pasteurize water with a sun oven is that if they keep a piece of cheesecloth with the sun oven, they can pour the water through the cheesecloth. That takes any solid impurities out of it. You can do the same thing with coffee filters, but coffee filters have to eventually be replaced, where cheesecloths would last indefinitely. If you take any solid impurities out of it with something like a filter just out of cheesecloth, and then you pasteurize it, it's a great way to purify water that gives you the opportunity to do that.
Right, but what I'm talking about is just ultraviolet radiation killing the bacteria and microbes that are in the water. Pasteurization, 160 degrees, that's heat, but what I was talking about was just a UV. And the next thing that I was going to talk about was a lot of the people over there, they live as a large family in a small area, don't they?
Oh, they sure do. It's amazing. You'll see what we would consider a small bedroom, and there'll be 6, 8, 10 people living in it. So they really, the footprints they require for housing in developing countries is totally different than what we have here.
Well, you have to almost think that we need to do something like that here, because with the way the families are, everybody's sitting inside watching TV. Nobody wants to go out. Everybody's sitting around. Nobody's talking to each other. They're stuck in their phones, things like that. When if you have a small area like that and you have 6 to 8 people in that one room, I think that you're going to spend a whole heck of a lot more time outside, and you're going to spend a lot more time building the relationships with your family as well.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, frankly, one of the saddest things that's happened to so many developing countries is the advent of cell phones. When I first started going to Haiti 18 years ago, nobody had a cell phone, and the people's sense of family and community was far greater even in Haiti, which is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. It's amazing that probably 2/3 of the people have cell phones, and they're picking up some of our bad habits. So, I think the sense of community that you get when you don't have the electronic devices, it's actually got a lot to be said for it, and very, very positive.
Yeah. All right, so I want to get to the sun oven. Can you give us a good description of exactly what the sun oven is? I know we've talked back and forth a little bit about some of the parts or what benefit it has, what it's doing over in third world countries, but just give us a description of what the sun oven is and what it does.
Well, basically, the simplest way to think of the sun oven is it's an extremely well-insulated box that's designed to get very hot. And the maximum temperature of cheese is 400 degrees, but very consistently you'll get 350, 375 degrees. And it can bake, and it can boil, and it can steam foods. And so it's a simple box that is designed the way that it works. Any of you, the listeners who are in a northern climate, on a winter day when it's very cold but sunny, sometimes you go out and you get in your car, and the greenhouse effect has trapped all of the hot air inside your car. Well, a sun oven uses the greenhouse effect, the greenhouse principle, pretty much the same as the hot air in your car. The only difference is we do everything we can to enhance it. The sun oven's got a very unique gasket that allows it to get so hot on the inside, and then it traps air inside so that you can cook, or it also can be used to dehydrate and boil and pasteurize water. So it's designed...
Well, speaking about the greenhouse effect, there was a guy, I think it might be the king of random, I'm not sure, but there's a guy who made a video, and he baked cookies in his car. And if you're baking cookies, on an oven that you basically have to set the oven to 300, 350, somewhere around there. And he baked cookies in his car, and they turned out like just real nice, gooey chocolate chip cookies.
Yeah, you can actually, believe it or not, you can bake cookies at temperatures as low as 200 degrees, and so it can be done on the dashboard of a car. many of the newer cars have heavier tinted windows that make it a little bit harder to do things like cookies in it. But that you can definitely do that with the greenhouse effect. It works very, very well for things like cookies.
Well, cool. How long the sun oven? Now, here's the thing. Okay, I'm going to use the sun oven. I'm going to bring it out every day that I can. When it's sunny outside, I want to bring it out. But if I'm using it every day, if I'm using it every other day or once a week, how long is the sun oven actually going to last me? Because it can't be too long, right? Because it's a bunch of moving parts that are put together.
Well, actually, the sun ovens have been on the market since 1986, and last year I was teaching a class in Arizona, and a gentleman showed me a picture of a sun oven he had bought from the inventor in 1988. He's used an average of 3 days a week since 1988, and there's no difference in the way the sun oven cooks. Cooked last year, 24 years later, from the time he bought it. So it really can last a lifetime. There's a wooden bezel or wooden frame on the sun oven, and it's been designed with the idea it could be used every day for 15 years in a third world country. But after 15 years, what gives out is the wood. And if every 5 years or so you take the hardware off the sun oven and you just treat the wood with linseed oil or wood stain, it will last a lifetime. There's no reason it isn't going to last 30 or 40 years. And I've seen ovens in developing countries that people have used daily for 12, 13, 14 years, and they don't look as nice. I mean, they're scratched and beat up and dinged and dented, but they cook just the same, even after years of being used virtually every day. So there's really nothing that can wear out in it. Reflectors are the material they're made out of is designed with the idea that it could be in the sun from sun up to sunset 365 days a year for 15 years before it would ever lose its reflectivity. So when you're putting it away on the days you're not using it, there is no reason it won't last a lifetime.
All right. Well, just to say, I noticed the wood finish on the top of the sun oven, and for something like what the sun oven is, you kind of think bare bones when you think of a solar oven. That's just kind of my thought. You think bare bones, and then you look at this thing, and it's got this nice wood finish on the top of it, and it's something that doesn't look unattractive. It's something that you can sit out, and it kind of looks nice because it's got that wood frame on the top of it.
Mm-hmm. No, it looks, many people, as you say, think of bare bones. People who are familiar with solar cooking oftentimes think of their kids may have had a science fair project at some point where they made a solar cooker out of cardboard and aluminum foil.
Pizza
and
box.
That's how they think it was, or pizza box, exactly. The difference is that most solar cooking is very slow cooking. It takes a long, long time to cook. The one unique thing about the sun oven is that if you want to slow cook, you can put a meal in the sun oven in the morning, set the oven facing south, and come home at dinner and have a cooked dinner. Or if you realign it to follow the sun every 30 minutes, your cooking times, if you realign it on a sunny day, is only going to be 15 minutes longer than it would be in your stovetop or your regular oven. You had 15 minutes each time you open the door of the sun oven. So you can cook in almost the same time if you choose to, or by putting it in one location and just letting it sit, you leave it ahead of the sun, so you kind of guess where the sun's going to be halfway in the time that you're going to set the sun oven out, then you're able to slow cook. So it gives you an option of cooking quickly or slowly, but the amazing thing is nothing burns in the sun oven and nothing dries out, so it's the most forgiving method of cooking you'll ever find. I've gone all over the world and taught thousands of people how to cook with the sun. Prior to working with sun ovens, my wife wouldn't even let me in the kitchen. I'm such a terrible cook, and now I'm considered an expert in doing it. It's not actually that I'm all that great a cook. It's just that the sun oven manages to compensate for pretty much any mistake I can make. When things don't burn and don't dry, it's pretty hard to screw anything up.
Right. Now, in full disclosure, Paul did actually send me a sun oven. He sent me this. I didn't have to pay for it. I want to disclose that. But I will tell you that I am critical when it comes to testing some stuff out. And I did try this sun oven, and I tried it in some of the worst possible environments that I could think of, at least around my home. And I will tell you that I was pleasantly surprised on it. Now, Paul, I actually cooked a pot of chili and some jalapeno cornbread at the same time. And that was...
would make that. I bet that would be delicious.
It was delicious. I had one problem. When I made the jalapeno cornbread, it was too moist. It was almost like jalapeno corn cake.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually took it out of the sun oven, stuck it in my oven, and browned the top a little bit.
Yeah, the moisture from, usually we don't recommend baking and cooking at the same time because it can get too moist. If you would, you could have accomplished the same thing if you took the chili out and let it finish in the sun oven. But that is one drawback if you try to bake and cook, is that you will get a little bit too much moisture in the baked goods.
Yeah, but I'll tell you what, man, it was really, really good. And you know what? The 5 minutes that I spent putting it on broil in my oven just to brown the top a little bit, that's a lot less time and a lot less heat than I would have used trying to cook everything right there in the kitchen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's the amazing thing is by keeping the heat outdoors, it's amazing how quickly a sun oven pays for itself. The average American family spends about 14% of the utility budget on cooking fuel to save a little bit of money on cooking fuel, but depending on where you're at, you can spend a lot more than that on air conditioning costs. So having a way to cook outdoors and not have your oven work against your air conditioning can reduce your utility bills a great deal.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting how the hottest days of the year are the sunniest days of the year, and those are the days that you don't want a hot oven going in your kitchen.
Exactly.
So it seems like a no-brainer to me to use a sun oven, and mostly because during the summertime, my air conditioning can barely keep up as it is from that hot sun. Down here in Tennessee, it gets pretty hot, and when it's not hot, it's so humid that it feels hot. And my air conditioner can only do so much. And if I've got my stove and my oven going all at the same time, nobody wants to eat in the kitchen after that because it's so hot in there. We have to actually open windows to let it air out. And if I just throw it in the sun oven earlier that day, well, then I'd be fine. Now, how can the sun oven be used for... We talked a little bit about it, but how can the sun oven itself be used for pasteurizing water? And how is this different than boiling it?
Okay, well, at most altitudes, water boils at 212 degrees, but it takes as much energy to bring water from 200 degrees to 212. The last 12 degrees take as much energy as bringing the water from the ambient temperature up to 200. Pasteurizing water is just bringing it up above 150 degrees for 6 minutes, and that kills the same germs as boiling it. And so when you bring water above 150 degrees for 6 minutes, all the germs are killed, and you get the same effect as boiling, but you're pasteurizing. And there's little devices that are available with the sun ovens called WAPIs, or water pasteurization indicators, and they're reusable plastic tubes that float on the top of a pot of water, and it has wax in it, and when the wax melts and goes to the bottom, the water is safe to drink, and then you can turn it over and reuse it hundreds of times. So the effect, the net result of pasteurizing and boiling is the same. It's just, of course, when you boil, you have the visual indicator of the bubbles to let you know that it's done. The water pasteurization indicator basically replaces the bubbles. But if you do that in the sun oven, whether you boil water or pasteurize water, you do it inside a pot with a lid or a canning jar with a lid. You do have to, when you're doing water in the sun oven, you do have to have it in something with a lid to keep all the steam inside of the pot or the canning jar. So you just you can take 6 quart-sized canning jars, for example, and put them on the leveling tray inside a sun oven, and you can do 6 quarts of water at the same time. If you're using a WAPI, you only need one of the water pasteurization indicators because everything in the sun oven is an even heat. So you know when one jar is safe to drink, the rest of them are. So you just put the water in. It works wonderfully for boiling or pasteurizing.
All right. So why do you need a lid on top of anything that's going to have water in it?
Well, you need pretty much everything you cook in the sun oven, with the exception of bakery goods, you do cook in a pot or a pan with a lid or a baking bag that you trap the moisture in. The sun oven is an airtight seal, so what we do is we latch the latches on the sun oven down tightly. It pushes the glass against the gasket that then forms an airtight seal to trap the hot air in to allow it to get really hot. If you didn't use a lid on the pot, what would happen is the moisture will escape from the pot, it will fog the inside of the glass, and eventually the denseness of the fog inside the glass starts to filter the sun out, and then it will make it so that the sun oven is not going to stay as hot. So that's why we always use a covered pot or a lid when we're boiling water or pasteurizing water, or pretty much for the cooking for the same reason.
Well, that's kind of the same problem I had when I did this chili and cornbread. I like to go back to it because that was the first thing that I ever did, and that was the biggest learning. It was in the middle of winter, okay, and I've got pictures of it, snow on the ground right below it, and at that point in time, the sun is the lowest it's going to be because it's winter, and so I had a really, really high angle. And in order to put everything in there, I used the double boiler set, and I used chili in one of them. I used chili in one of them, and I put the cornbread in the other one. So both of them had lids. The problem, I had a big problem with it though, is some of the water escaping out of the chili, fogging up on the window, and then coming down into the bottom of the sun oven as well. Not only that, but I had to kind of deal with everything being tilted at an angle, because at the angle that I had to put everything, I had an issue with the chili kind of, it's chili, it's liquid, so it wasn't flat.
Well, I mean, the chili probably cooked evenly, even if it wasn't flat. But when in the winter, when you do have it at the extreme angle, you need to make sure you leave a 3 or 4 inches at the top of the pot so that it stays. Because the leveling tray in the sun oven will keep things level, but in the winter you do have to have it on an extreme angle. And so what I usually do in the winter months is don't fill the pot quite as full, and it works well. It sounds to me that if the way the sun oven is designed, the stackable pots are designed so that you don't use a lid on the bottom one. You put the top pot on top of the bottom pot, and that serves as the lid for it. And it sounds like maybe the way the lids were on, more moisture got out of it than should have, and that is what created the problem. I mean, I've used the sun oven year-round. They work really, really well, but it is important to make sure that you do everything you can to get a good seal on the pots, try to keep the moisture inside the pot as opposed to letting it escape.
Right. So what I ended up having was I tried the cornbread on top first and the chili on bottom, but it turned out that I had to do cornbread on bottom, chili on top, and then I also had the black lid, and that wouldn't fit because of the angle, so I had to put the glass lid on, and everything turned out fine. At the end of it, it was one of the most delicious chilies and cornbread that I've ever had, and it was all done in the middle of winter, snow on the ground, at an extreme angle, and the sun was going behind trees and stuff because I put it in a bad spot and all that. And at the end of the day, I mean, throughout the day, I kind of looked at it and stuff like that. And even with the condensation on the glass, it was 350, 375 degrees, which is more than enough to cook chili. And then but the one thing is, if the sun goes behind your fence, it will drop down to 100 degrees quick.
Yeah, in the winter it drops a lot faster, that's for sure. And you do need to kind of watch it in the winter. I mentioned that you could slow cook in the sun oven. I do that a lot in the summer, but I don't attempt to slow cook in the winter at all because weather changes so quickly. Plus, the days are so much shorter in the winter than they are in the summer. In June, you can use the sun oven 12 hours a day. In December, it's more like 5 hours. So there's quite a little bit of difference between winter and summer cooking. The temperature isn't really the issue. It's more the length of the days and the amount of direct sunlight.
Right, so you can cook almost anything in a sun oven that you can put in an oven or on a stove as long as it's not fried. What about crockpot dishes? Are crockpot dishes really good to put in the sun oven?
All of those work real well, and you can do crockpot dishes. The amazing thing, if you want to, you can actually cook crockpot dishes faster. If you put it in, they'll be done. You can, something that you would normally simmer for 6 or 7 hours, you can do in an hour, hour and a half if you realign the sun oven every 30 minutes, and you'll get that same taste. Because of the even heat in the sun oven and the fact that nothing dries out, crockpot dishes taste really good when you make them in the sun.
So I would also think, though, that if you're going to do something that's like a slow cooker, you're probably going to want to use more like a Dutch oven than you are a regular pan because, we both know what a Dutch oven is for. It's to retain the heat. That's why you put it on a fire or something like that, and it allows the heat to permeate through the entire Dutch oven, and it can retain the heat even when the fire is gone. So I would imagine using that inside a sun oven would do the same thing, and that would probably be your best bet if you're wanting to do like slow cooker type stuff, right?
Right. The advantage of the Dutch oven inside the sun oven is that once the Dutch oven gets hot, even if the sun completely disappears, like you mentioned, the sun dropped behind the fence. In the Dutch oven, if it had gotten hot and the sun drops behind the fence, the retained heat from the Dutch oven inside the extremely well-insulated sun oven will allow the food to finish cooking. So for slow cooking, a Dutch oven works great. However, if you wanted to cook quickly, the Dutch oven is going to take an hour and a half longer to come up to temperature in the sun oven than, say, the enamelware pot, the black steel coated with enamel pots that oftentimes come with the sun oven. So the time it takes to get the pot hot is a lot longer with the Dutch oven, but the advantage is it will retain the heat. So even if it suddenly gets completely overcast, if the sun oven's well insulated, you just leave it in and don't open the door. That retained heat will allow it to finish cooking.
Right. We're just using the principle of thermal mass. This is the same principle that rocket stoves and things like that work. Not rocket stove, but like a rocket mass heater. We use thermal masses in order to heat up and cool down. You can run it for an hour, and then the entire thermal mass is hot by the end of it because you're using an extreme heat when you're burning, and then the mass on the exhaust of that rocket mass heater will keep the space warm for 6 to 7 hours even after that. So Dutch oven's pretty much the same thing as that. Now, Paul, do you have any like really good recipes or anything like that on your website or anything for the sun oven?
Yeah, actually, on our website we do have over 800 recipes. There's a woman who works with us. She had actually made a commitment several years ago that she cooked every day for a year. That time she lived in Phoenix and cooked every day for a year in her sun oven and blogged about it, and I met her, and now she works with us, and she posts 2 or 3 new recipes every week. And so we have over 800 recipes on the website divided into numerous categories. There's 37 different categories. Someone's a vegetarian, they can go to the vegetarian section, or if they want pork, there's a section on pork. So, and each of the recipes has cooking tips and a photograph and information. So if somebody goes to our website, sunoven.com, and they just click on the recipe blog, they'll be able to see the list of recipes and choose a recipe they'd like to cook. If they want to save it, they can just print it out and save it to keep if they want to use it in case there was some point where they couldn't access the computer.
And I would imagine those recipes are also usable on the stove and in the oven as well. They're just
Very much
recipes,
so.
but they are designed more specifically with the sun oven in mind.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's talk about some of the extremes here. Cloud cover. We have cloud cover on a day, and we want to use the sun oven. Tell me when I can, exactly when I can and when I can't use it.
Okay, well, it's real simple to know when you can use it. There has to be enough sun to cast a shadow. So if it's overcast to the point where you can't see a shadow on the ground, I always say think of the groundhog. If you see a shadow, you can cook in it. If you're not able to see a shadow, you can't. So it's not difficult to know when you can or can't cook in the sun. And as I mentioned earlier, the outside temperature doesn't make any difference. We have pictures on our website of them using sun ovens at the base camp of Mount Everest, and one of the outfitters has been using them there for more than 20 years, and it rarely gets above 10 degrees Fahrenheit, but it's sunny all the time, and they work really well in the cold weather as long as you can see a shadow on the ground.
All right, well, how about this then? How big of a turkey can you put in it, and how long will it take to cook?
Well, you can cook up to a 21-pound turkey in the baking bag in the sun oven. The sun oven has a leveling rack that we mentioned earlier that keeps your food from spilling when you when you adjust it to follow the sun. That leveling rack folds up and goes in the bottom of the oven, and you can then take up to a 21-pound turkey, put it in a baking bag, you tie the baking bag tight, and put it in the sun oven. And anytime I've ever made a turkey and anybody who's eaten it has said that the light meat's more moist than any dark meat turkey they've ever eaten. It's just incredible how moist a turkey comes out. If you realign the sun oven every 30 minutes or so, you can cook a 21-pound turkey in approximately 6 hours. What I generally do if I'm cooking a 15 to 20-pound turkey in a sun oven is I put it in the morning and I realign the oven 3 or 4 times during the day, and then at supper it's done. And if you take a little bit of olive oil or butter and you rub it on the skin of the turkey, you'll get a really, really crispy brown. It browns very, very nicely in the sun. It's just hard to describe how moist the turkey is when it's made in the sun oven.
All right. Well, I think I know what I'm doing for Thanksgiving this year. Is maybe I'll get some turkeys for real cheap, and I'll go ahead and start cooking those up whenever the sun comes out.
Yeah, you'll really enjoy it. And what a lot of people do is at the holidays, you mentioned the cheap turkeys. At Thanksgiving, a lot of times the supermarkets will put turkeys on sale as a loss leader, and many people will buy them at that point, put them in their freezer, and then on the really, really hot days in July and August, they love when people are complaining about the heat, saying, I'm at home baking a turkey, and they can, on a hot day in the summer, the turkey is really delicious, and it's actually cheaper than hamburger oftentimes if you buy it on sale at the holiday time.
All right. So how do you know when food is done in the sun oven? How do you know that the food is actually done?
Well, a couple of different ways. With most things, and when we talked about moisture in the glass, with most things, if you've had the food in a little while and you start to see moisture build up on the bottom of the glass and gradually raise up, that's how usually the first telltale sign that I know the food is done. Because nothing dries out, you could leave the food in the sun oven another 4 or 5 hours and it's not going to hurt anything, but that's usually how I tell. If I'm baking something, well, like a turkey, you can tell kind of by looking at it, or you could put a meat thermometer in it, and with the turkey, for example, if the internal temperature of the meat reads 165, then you know it's done. So you can use a probe or a meat thermometer in things like meats or breads to tell when it's done. For the most part, though, it's just kind of by instinct. You check it know that it's ready just by the way, like with bread, I'll tap the top of it and can tell from that. One of the great things to make in the sun oven is hard-boiled eggs, because fresh eggs are easy to peel when you do them that way. With a hard-boiled egg, I'll take it out of the sun oven, set one of the eggs on a table, and spin it. If it spins evenly like a top, then I know that it's done. So it depends on what you're cooking, how you know it's done, but there's a variety of ways.
All right. Well, kind of veer off track a little bit. The sun oven is a box solar cooker. Now, there are panel cookers and parabolic cookers as well. Now, I know that you kind of like to stick with your own brand because that's what you know, but can you give people like kind of a brief advantage and disadvantage, or better yet, which one to use at what time between a panel cooker, a box cooker, and a parabolic?
Well, I mean, if you want to use a parabolic, for example, for boiling and for frying, parabolics are great. I mean, you can boil much faster in a parabolic than you can in. For those who don't know what we're talking about, if you think of a satellite dish with something in the middle, or an upside-down umbrella with a pot on the end of the umbrella handle, parabolic cooker reflects light out at a focal point, and because of that, a well-designed parabolic cooker is really great for frying, really great for being able to bring things to a boil. It's very easy to burn things in a parabolic, so there are that's the drawback. The single biggest drawback of the parabolic is having a place to use it where it's safe. We do a lot of work in third world countries, as we talked about, so we won't use parabolics because of the issue of child blindness. And the single biggest drawback of a parabolic is that if you ever to look at the focal point of it, you'd be permanently blinded by the light. So you have to be extremely cautious with a parabolic when you use it, how you use it, and who's going to be around it. If you're cooking by yourself, you can wear eye protection, and that's not a problem. And if you don't look at the focal point, it's not a problem. But sometimes it's difficult if children or curious onlookers come, and you really want to be careful with that. The box type cookers, which is what the Sun Oven is, are great because nothing burns in them. They're the most forgiving way of cooking that you'll find, and they really allow foods to get moist, and they're easier to use in many ways. The drawback of them is in the area of boiling, or you can't fry, period, and it takes longer to bring water to a boil in a box cooker. Panel cookers are good for some types of cooking. They are slower than a Sun Oven. They're on par with most box-type cookers, and they are considerably slower than the Sun Oven or the parabolic cooker. The one drawback of the panel cookers are they do have a tendency to get affected by wind, and when it's windy, it's very hard to get food to, wind doesn't have much effect on the Sun Oven cooking because it's sealed inside the box, but because with most panel cookers your pot is exposed, wind can make it difficult to cook in.
Okay, so why would someone use a panel cooker then?
Frankly, very few people do. Most panel cookers are more for kids' science fair projects and that type of thing. They're not as widely used as the parabolic or the box type cooker.
Now, the parabolic that is basically the same. It's using the same technique, I guess, where we would harvest solar light in a field. How I'm going to say this, a solar farm essentially, but we're not talking photocells, we're talking mirrors, and the mirrors will focus the sun in the entire field up to a tower, and that tower, I think gets thousands of degrees, but that tower will then be used, it'll steam off, and we'll use that to push a turbine. So I assume the parabolic is essentially just that, and the box cooker is pretty much like that as well, just not to that degree like a parabolic is.
Well, but the single biggest difference between the two is that the parabolic reflects light out, a box cooker reflects light in.
Right.
And the box cooker reflects light into a chamber of some sort where the parabolic reflects the light out. So that's the primary difference, but the principles then are very similar, except that with the parabolic, because you're shining on a focal point, you're focusing heat in one place, where with a box cooker, what you're really doing is just heating air, and then the air is heating the food. So that's the parabolic is more like a pointed fire. The simplest way to think of it would be almost like a torch, that's focused on one particular point. where with the box cooker you're trying to take the entire chamber and get the air hot and then allow the hot air to cook food.
All right. Well, now you mentioned it earlier, and I just kind of wanted to come back to it. The Villager Sun Oven that you were talking about. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and how awesome that thing is?
Yeah, the Villager Sun Ovens are amazing. They're actually very large. The reflectors are about 8 feet in diameter, and with the All-American Sun Oven, the leveling tray swings back and forth. In the Villager Sun Oven, there's a rigid tray, and the entire oven then just kind of cranks up and down around it. And they're so large that they are sold on small trailers. The trailers aren't really designed for transport. They're designed so that the oven can be pushed outside during the day and then pushed in those secure area overnight for storage. And when they're folded up, they're about 6 feet tall, and they can be pushed into an area for storage. And then one man or two women on level ground can push it outside, and it sets up in less than 10 minutes and comes down in less than 5 minutes. And where the glass door on the All-American Sun Oven is a low-iron single pane of glass. On the Villager Sun Oven, there's actually a double pane of glass with an inch of air between the two panes of glass to serve as an insulator. And the Villager Sun Oven also has a propane backup system, and it's so efficient because it's so well insulated to trap the sun that you can actually make over 10,000 meals on one 20-pound canister of propane.
All right, so the Villager oven sounds like a really cool thing, especially if we were going to have a neighborhood that's going to use it, let's say in like a stink hit the fan scenario.
Yeah, we don't sell them in the U.S. We only sell them internationally. But they are used for communal cooking internationally, like in a school or a hospital or an orphanage, or for bakeries. We find in the U.S. People don't want to. I mean, it's designed to be used in a third world country with 15 years with no maintenance, but everything on it is completely manual. There's nothing at all we make nothing that isn't manually done, so nothing can break pretty much. And people in the U.S. want something that's when people look at it in the U.S., they think, well, we should put a self-tracking device on it, or should make an automatic way for the propane to work. And the propane backup, for example, is a torch that you actually stick in the oven. You turn on, you bring the oven up to a temperature, you turn it off. And so people in the U.S. want something a little more sophisticated than the Villager Sun Oven. So we don't market them in the U.S., but we do have them in more than 55 countries around the world.
All right, well, it sounds like you need to make it in the U.S. so I can buy one. All right, so why did...
Well, we make them in the U.S. I just mean we don't market them in the U.S. So.
Well, then maybe we'll just have to go through some back door somewhere so that we can purchase one, right? So why did you choose to market the Sun Oven to preppers of all people?
Well, frankly, because I am one, number one. I mean, I'm very much, my wife and I are very committed to emergency preparedness and do a lot to try to, become more and more self-reliant. But we've also found that once people discover the Sun Oven for prepping, it just fits. I mean, you can store food for a year, but you can't store fuel for a year. So people who don't have access to an unlimited supply of wood or some other fuel source, in most areas of the country, you can use the Sun Oven between 60 to 80% of the days, at least for part of the day. So the amount that of fuel you need to store then is a lot less. And so as I frankly, when I got involved with Sun Ovens 18 years ago, I never even thought of them for emergency preparedness, nor did I think about getting prepared. During the Y2K preparation time, we really started to see how much sense the Sun Oven made, and since then, the majority of the Sun Ovens purchased in the U.S. are purchased by people to, be better prepared for emergencies. But as I mentioned earlier, it's one preparedness item that, will pay for itself so quickly just by using it. It's difficult sometimes with food storage when you're trying to buy food to feed your family now as well as store food for tomorrow, the sun oven, once it's paid for itself, can actually contribute to your budget and help fund some of your other preparedness supplies. So it just is such a natural fit for for preppers to use a sun oven.
Okay, so the sun oven is made basically of a plastic shell with insulation inside, correct?
Well, okay, the outer box of the sun oven is made of ABS plastic. The inner box of the sun oven is made of a black anodized aluminum, and then between the aluminum inner box and the plastic outer box, there's a very thick pad of a non-toxic food-grade fiberglass insulation. And so the outer plastic box never actually gets hot, so we can get away with using plastic there, but the inner box is a black anodized aluminum.
Okay, so you said food grade. Now, are there any other box cookers that you know of that don't use a food grade?
Well, I mean, there are some that, for example, use like a wall board or that type of thing. Many people make homemade solar ovens and don't realize that they think, okay, insulation works great, so they use like a building type or home insulation, which is fine if you're cooking something in a pot, but you'd never, ever want to bake bread or cook anything open because it emits toxic fumes at high temperatures. So the insulation we use is actually made for pizza ovens to be able to keep the and is non-toxic. But if you use the same kind of insulation you use in your attic, you'd find that could be dangerous and could have a really serious effect in regards to being able to having it so that you just wouldn't be safe. But there's no professional. Well, I shouldn't say it. There with the original model of the sun oven, there was a Chinese knockoff that was marketed in the United States, and they actually were using a food grade, a non-food grade, a building type insulation in it, and they were selling them. They just knocked it off and figured insulation's insulation, and really didn't care. And so for about 4 years, there was a commercial sun oven knockoff that didn't have food grade fiberglass in it.
All right. So I was going to ask you a little bit about the difference between the All-American and the global sun oven, but or the international sun oven. I don't remember what you call it. But either way, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to ask that. I will go to the next thing, though, and that would be the days that the sun oven is not possible to use. Do you have anything else that's available so that we have a backup means of cooking other than just in our solar box cooker?
Well, okay, there's two things. One is even on days when you can't cook in the sun oven at all, you can still use it as a wonder box or retained heat cooker. You mentioned the idea earlier when we talked about the cast iron, Dutch ovens, that the Dutch oven would retain the heat, and you can start cooking, get something cooked with a fuel source like wood or charcoal, and get it half cooked. And even in the winter, you can put it inside the sun oven in the house, seal it tightly, and the retained heat from the Dutch oven inside the well-insulated sun oven will allow the food to finish cooking. So you can do about half of the cooking still, even with no sun in the sun oven. We also market little devices that are called Cloudy Day cube stoves, and they're a simple cube stove that we market Cloudy Day fuel discs with it that are you can put a fuel disc into the cube stove, or you can use 7 different fuels, wood or sterno or charcoal, and then you can still use that for cooking. And you mentioned rocket stoves earlier. It's a similar concept to rocket stove. It's just a very small device that can be used as a backup on the days when you can't use the sun oven.
Okay, all right. Now, there's only one more thing that I'm really going to talk about now, and that would be the webinar that we're talking about doing. So you and I were talking about doing a webinar where you talk about basically how to use the sun oven in cooking, and you talk about best practices of solar cooking and things like that. Now that link, and I believe we can sign up for that today. That link would be at theprepperpodcast.com Sun Oven Webinar, all one word. ThePrepperPodcast.com/ Sun Oven Webinar. Now, I asked Paul about giving you guys a discount that were listening in on the show. Paul quickly reminded me that he could do that, but he would prefer to send us to this webinar page and give us a bigger discount on the webinar page. So there's no actual discount on the Sun Oven for this episode. I mainly wanted to announce this webinar because if you go to this webinar, and that's once again at theprepperpodcast.com/ Sun Oven Webinar, if you go there, I promise you at the end of it, you will not regret going to the webinar. And well, first off, you're learning things about solar cooking, and you can never learn too much about a sustainable way of cooking. And second, at the end of it, I think Paul has a few announcements that he's going to make about the Sun Oven, and I think you'll probably want to hear those announcements. Isn't that right, Paul?
Yes, very much so. And during the webinar, by the way, we will be accepting questions. So if you had questions from tonight, if you come to the webinar, and you can feel free to ask questions throughout it, and we'll be stopping throughout the webinar to take your questions. So it's definitely interactive and designed to help you learn a lot more about the Sun Oven. And then we've got a very unique offer that is going to be made for those who do watch the webinar.
All right. Well, Paul, I really enjoyed having you on here, and I want to go out and use my Sun Oven, but because it's 8 o'clock at night right now, I can't go out and do that, so I have to wait until tomorrow. So I appreciate that.
Really great. Well, hopefully between now and the webinar, you'll have a little more chance to cook in it, and we can talk about what other things you've discovered. So that'll be super.
All right. Well, Paul, it was fun having you, and you have a great night.
You too. God bless. Thanks so much for allowing me to talk about Sun Oven.
No problem.
All right. Bye now.
Thank you, Paul. Now, don't forget to give me a review at theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes, and you could win a consulting call with me. Don't forget the webinar with Paul Munsen of Sun Oven International for the power of a Sun Oven. You will not want to miss. Tuesday, July 21st is when it's going to be. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Central. That's 8 p.m. Eastern, 6 Mountain, and 5 Pacific. Space is limited, so go to theprepperpodcast.com/Sun Oven Webinar. This is the only week I will be announcing this webinar, so don't forget to sign up when this podcast is done. And with that, this was Ken Jensen of theprepperpodcast.com with Paul Munsen of sunoven.com, teaching you strategies on self-reliance so that you can build a more resilient and enjoyable life. Have a wonderful week. This is Ken, signing out. The Prepper Podcast is part of the Clever Survivalist Network at cleversurvivalist.com and a member of the Prepper Broadcasting Network at prepperbroadcasting.com. And if you've been listening to my podcast for any length of time, I want to thank you. I value the time that you give me to teach. I also have a mailing list. Fill out the banner on theprepperpodcast.com to get episodes and special deals delivered straight to your inbox. And you'll also get a free copy of my book, The Honey and the Bee. Head over to iTunes and give me a review at theprepperpodcast.com/iTunes. The better my reviews, the more people will find me on iTunes. If you like what I do and you want to support my efforts, go to my shop. Go to my Survival Gear Tools shop, where I have lots of awesome prepping and survival tools at survivalgeartools.com. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, or YouTube, or connect to me on Zello, the smartphone walkie-talkie app. You can get there by going to theprepperpodcast.com/Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, or YouTube. Also, check out the Top Survival Forum out there by going to topsurvivalforum.com. Questions, comments, feedback, click on the green banner on the right side of my homepage. Call 978-KNOWS-IT. That is 978-566-9748. Or you can just contact me at theprepperpodcast.com/feedback. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, go to theprepperpodcast.com/guests. And if you would like to interview me on your podcast, go to theprepperpodcast.com/media.